Most people think a marriage ends with a scream. Mine ended with a laugh. The air in the dining room was cold, smelling of expensive eucalyptus and the $4,000 bottle of Bordeaux Max had just opened. He didn't look at me as he sat there, his tailored shirt straining against arms. He spent 3 hours a day carving in the gym. He was looking at his reflection in a steak knife. "Isla, look at you," Max said, his voice smooth and clinical, like a doctor diagnosing a terminal patient. "You've become stagnant. You spend your days talking to plants at your foundation while I'm out there moving markets and breaking records. I'm supporting your legacy, Max," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I've built a home for you." Max let out a short, mocking bark of a laugh. He stood up, towering over me, the sheer physical presence of him designed to make me feel small. He reached out and pinched the fabric of my silk dress at the waist. "The house is a museum and you're just another exhibit. Isla, one that's gathering dust. I need fire. I need someone who can keep up with my pace." He leaned down, his breath hot against my ear. "Don't bother waiting up tonight. I'm heading back to the office. I have a merger that requires my full physical attention. Try to find a hobby that doesn't involve dirt and flowers. It's pathetic." He didn't even say goodbye. The heavy oak door slammed, the vibration rattling the fine china I'd spent all afternoon setting. I collapsed into the chair, the first sob breaking out of my chest like a physical wound. I cried until my eyes were swollen shut, feeling like a discarded toy. I felt old, weak, and utterly invisible. I sat in the dark for hours, mourning a man who was already a ghost. At 1 a.m., I dragged myself to the kitchen for a glass of water. My laptop sat on the island, the screen glowing. I went to close it, but a persistent ping echoed in the silent room. It was a system sync notification from Max's Sentinel biometric account. I frowned, wiping a stray tear. Max always bragged that his heart was a perfect machine. I clicked the notification, expecting to see his resting heart rate from a late night at the office. But the data on the screen didn't show a man sitting at a desk. The GPS map showed a pulsating red dot in the warehouse. District and area filled with underground, gyms and private lofts. The biometric graph showed a spike in adrenaline and a heart rate of 165 beats per minute. It had been sustained for 45 minutes. He wasn't at a merger. He was at a workout. But then I saw the secondary data, the skin, temperature readings, and the respiratory sync. Max wasn't alone. Another Sentinel device was synced to the same location, the two heartbeats moving in a perfect rhythmic duet. The crying stopped. The heat that rose in my chest wasn't sadness anymore. It was a cold, blistering white light. I looked at the steak knife Max had been using to admire himself. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the private investigator I'd met through the foundation. "Max wants fire?" I whispered to the empty, expensive room. "I'm going to give him a goddamn inferno." The warehouse district was a skeletal landscape of rusted corrugated, metal and flickering streetlights. It was a place where billionaires went to do the things they couldn't do in their glass towers. I sat in my black SUV, the engine killed, watching the entrance of a building that looked like a tomb. A small, matte black sign hung over the heavy steel door, the Iron Sanctuary. I had traded my silk gown for a hooded tracksuit and a baseball cap pulled low. My heart was no longer the frantic, wounded bird it had been at the dinner table. It was a cold, rhythmic drum. I stepped out of the car, the humid night air clinging to my skin, and followed the sound of a heavy, industrial bass line vibrating through the pavement. I didn't enter through the front. My foundation had done the landscaping for this entire block 3 years ago. I knew the service entrances better than the owners. I slipped through a side fire door, the smell of ozone, expensive rubber, and sweat hitting me like a physical blow. I found myself on a darkened mezzanine overlooking the main floor. Down below was a playground for the elite, custom-made equipment plated in chrome and gold, and there in the center of the fluorescent glow was Max. He was mid-set on a squat rack, 300 pounds of iron groaning under his power. But he wasn't alone. Standing behind him, her hands resting lightly on his waist as he descended, was Roxanne. She was a masterpiece of biological engineering. Her skin was bronzed, her muscles defined like a marble statue, and her eyes held the predatory glint of a woman who knew exactly what she had stolen. She wasn't just a mistress. She was the female version of Max. "Lower, Max," she purred, her voice carrying through the empty gym. "Control the weight. Don't let it control you." As Max stood up, his veins bulging, he didn't reach for a towel. He reached for her. He kissed her with a hunger he hadn't shown me in 5 years, a raw, desperate possessiveness. "I'm divorcing her, Rox," Max panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The paperwork is being drafted. I've already moved the first $300 million into the Thornex account. By the time Isla realizes the bank accounts are empty, we'll be on the jet to Dubai. She can keep the house and her precious flowers. I'm taking the empire." Roxanne laughed, a sharp metallic sound. "She's a gardener, Max. She wouldn't know what to do with an empire anyway. She's probably at home right now, crying into her tea." I gripped the cold metal railing of the mezzanine so hard my knuckles turned white. My first instinct was to scream, to throw a weight plate through the air and watch his perfect face shatter. But then I remembered what Max always said about business. The man who reacts first loses. The man who plans wins. I pulled out my phone and switched the camera to 4K video. I recorded it all. The kiss, the confession of the stolen millions, the mockery of my life's work. But as I zoomed in on their faces, I noticed something odd. Roxanne wasn't looking at Max with love. As he turned his back to load more weight, she glanced at her own phone, a quick, transactional smirk crossing her lips. She tapped a message and tucked the phone away. I stayed long enough to see them head into the private recovery suite, a room filled with cryotherapy tanks and IV drips. I slipped back out into the night, my mind racing. $300 million was just the start. If Max was funneling money into Thornex, he was committing marital fraud on a massive scale. But he was smart. He would have layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. I got back into my car and opened my laptop. I didn't go to a lawyer. Not yet. Instead, I opened the encrypted server for my botanical foundation. People think botanists just grow roses. They forget that we are chemists. We understand toxins, growth hormones, and the delicate balance of the human endocrine system. Max thought I was a gardener. He forgot that a gardener knows exactly how much poison it takes to kill a weed without waking the neighbors. I looked at the video of Max's perfect body. He was obsessed with his alpha status. He was obsessed with being the strongest man in every room. "You want fire, Max?" I whispered, starting a new spreadsheet titled Project Decay. "I'm going to watch you burn from the inside out." Before I drove away, my private investigator messaged me back. He had found the registration for Thornex. It wasn't just a fitness brand. It was a biotech firm. Max was planning to launch a line of Billionaire supplements, illegal, high-potency performance enhancers, and he was using Roxanne's name because she had no legal ties to our marriage. But the twist? The lead investor for Thornex wasn't some anonymous billionaire. It was Victor Drake, Max's biggest rival and the man who had been trying to bankrupt Thorn Capital for a decade. Max wasn't just cheating on me. He was committing treason against his own company. He was selling his soul to the devil to get away from me. I smiled for the first time in days. If Max wanted to play with fire, I was going to make sure the entire world saw him get burned. For the next 3 weeks, I became the woman Max wanted. I was the silent ghost in the silk robe, the one who didn't ask questions when he came home at 3 a.m., smelling of Roxanne's high-end sweat and industrial gym rubber. I waited for him in the kitchen every morning at 4:30 a.m., just as he finished his ice bath. "Max, I've been thinking," I said one morning, my voice soft, eyes downcast to hide the cold fire within them. "You were right. I've become stagnant. I want to support your vision for Thornex. I want to help you optimize." Max paused, his bare chest glistening, looking at me like a king looking at a peasant who had finally learned to bow. "The botanical charity finally bored you, Isla?" I realized that plants are just chemistry, I lied. Handed him a crystal glass of green juice. "And you are the ultimate formula. Let me handle your daily supplement stacks. I've been studying the biohacking journals you leave around. I want you to be the god you say you are." Max chuckled, a sound of pure, arrogant triumph. He patted my cheek. Good girl. It's about time you made yourself useful. That was his second fatal mistake. He gave me access to his private biolab, a climate-controlled room in our basement filled with thousands of dollars of custom peptides, hormones, and synthetic vitamins. Every night while Max was training at the Iron Sanctuary, I was in that lab. I didn't use anything that would show up on a standard toxicology report. As a botanist, I knew the power of phytoestrogens and specialized alkaloids compounds that don't kill but reconfigure. I began microdosing his alpha stack with a concentrated extract of Glycyrrhiza glabra and a synthetic derivative of a rare orchid that suppressed dihydrotestosterone, DHT. To the naked eye, the powders looked identical. But inside Max's body, the war had begun. The change was subtle at first. During the second week, Max stood in front of the full-length mirror in our bedroom, frowning. He was flexing, but the pop in his muscles was gone. He looked soft. Is the lighting in here off? He snapped, pinching the skin at his waist. I feel like I'm holding water. My definition is fading. You're just working too hard, darling, I said, stepping behind him and massaging his shoulders. Maybe you need to increase your intake. I doubled the dose that night. By the third week, the Titan was cracking. Max started losing patches of his hair not in a natural way, but in frantic, thinning clumps. His skin, once bronzed and tight, became sallow. But the most delicious part was the brain fog. Max Thorne, the man who could calculate complex market derivatives in his head, started forgetting names. He fumbled his words during a high-stakes Zoom call with Victor Drake. I watched from the doorway as he screamed at his laptop, his face turning a blotchy, uneven red. I'm losing my edge, Isla! He roared, throwing a $200 bottle of supplements across the room. I feel like my body is betraying me. It's the stress of the divorce. Max, I whispered, kneeling to pick up the bottle. Once you leave me and launch Thorn X with Roxanne, you'll feel like yourself again. Just take your vitamins. He grabbed the glass from my hand and downed it. He was literally drinking his own downfall, and he was thanking me for it. While Max was spiraling, I wasn't just playing chemist. I had installed a hidden pet camera in the biolab, disguised as a carbon monoxide detector. One afternoon, while I was at the foundation, my phone buzzed. I opened the feed to see Max and Roxanne in the lab. They weren't there for the supplements. Max was opening his floor safe, pulling out a ledger. The SEC is sniffing around the primary accounts, Max hissed to Roxanne. Victor says we need to move the final $200 million into the Thornix shell today. If Isla finds out, she'll have enough grounds to freeze everything. Roxanne leaned against the lab table, picking at her perfect manicure. Then speed it up, Max. You look like hell, by the way. If you don't fix whatever is going on with your face, I'm not sure I want to be the first lady of a fitness empire with a man who looks like a melting candle. Max flinched. The look of pure, pathetic desperation on his face was better than any orchid extract I could have brewed. I'm doing this for us, Max shouted. You're doing it for yourself, Roxanne countered coldly. Just get the money moved. Victor is waiting. As they left the room, I saw Roxanne linger back for a second. She reached into her gym bag, pulled out a small flash drive, and plugged it into Max's laptop. She was downloading his private keys, his access to the encrypted crypto wallets. I leaned back in my chair at the foundation, a cold smile spreading across my face. Max was stealing from me. Roxanne was stealing from Max. And Victor Drake was likely planning to eliminate them both once the money was moved. They were all snakes, biting each other's tails in a circle of greed. And I was the one holding the cage. I picked up the phone and called a number I had saved under catering. It wasn't a caterer. It was a forensic accountant with a specialty in offshore crypto recovery. It's time, I said. The money has moved. Trace the Thornix wallet. I want the digital poison ready for the gala. Max came upstairs that night, looking more frail than ever. Isla, he said, his voice cracking. The Thorn Annual Charity Gala is in 48 hours. I need to be perfect. Give me the double dose. I need to show the world I'm still the alpha. I smiled, stirring his nightly recovery drink. Don't worry, Max. By the end of that gala, the whole world will be talking about your performance. The Thorne Annual Charity Gala was the Met Gala of the financial world. The ballroom was a sea of black tuxedos, shimmering diamonds and the scent of over-expensive lilies. The air was thick with the hushed murmurs of the elite, all waiting for Max Thorne to take the stage and announce his next evolution. Max looked like a man made of paper and glass. Under the harsh stage lights, his tuxedo seemed to hang off his shrinking frame. The slow poison of my botanical extracts had done its work. He was pale, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was sweating through his bespoke shirt. Roxanne was there too, dressed in a daring, metallic gold dress that screamed trophy wife in waiting. She stood in the front row, watching Max with the cold, calculating eyes of a scavenger waiting for a predator to die. I stood in the wings, wearing a dress of deep, midnight emerald, the color of a jungle floor. I looked radiant. I looked powerful. I looked like a woman who hadn't slept in weeks because she was too busy sharpening her knives. "Ladies and gentlemen," Max began, his voice raspy and thin. "Tonight we don't just talk about charity. We talk about the future of human performance, the future of Thorne X." He gestured to the massive LED screen behind him. This was supposed to be the moment the sleek, high-octane marketing video for his new empire played. This was supposed to be his Steve Jobs moment. The screen flickered, but it didn't show fitness models or crypto charts. It showed a high-resolution split-screen display. On the left was Max's Sentinel biometric data from the last 3 months, showing his heart rate spikes during his late nights at the office. On the right, it showed the GPS map of the Iron Sanctuary, gym, and the hidden camera footage I had recorded. The ballroom went silent. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. The video played the crystal-clear audio of Max and Roxanne in the biolab. "I've already moved the first 300 million. By the time Isla realizes the bank accounts are empty, we'll be on the jet to Dubai." Max froze. He turned around, staring at the screen as if it were a ghost. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He looked like a cornered animal. But I wasn't done. The screen shifted again. It showed the ThorneX crypto wallet addresses and a detailed list of every cent Max had funneled into Victor Drake's shell companies. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It was a public confession of grand larceny and corporate espionage. "Max?" I said, walking out onto the stage with a microphone in my hand. My voice was calm, echoing through the stunned silence of the room. "You told me I was stagnant. You told me I was just an exhibit in your museum." I turned to the audience, pointing to the screen where a final document appeared, a signed legal injunction. "Tonight, I'm closing the exhibit. I filed for divorce 4 hours ago. Because Max used marital assets to fund a company based on fraud, the court has granted an emergency freeze on every account associated with ThorneX, including the accounts Roxanne thought were in her name." Roxanne's face went from gold to ghostly white. She looked at her phone, likely trying to check her balance, only to find it blocked. I walked over to Max. He was shaking, his hand clutching his chest as his Sentinel ring began to beep frantically. "Your heart rate is 180, Max," I whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "You should really watch your stress levels. After all, the SEC agents waiting in the lobby don't like to be kept waiting." As if on cue, 4 men in dark suits stepped through the back of the ballroom. Max collapsed onto his knees. The alpha was gone. In his place was a broken, sickly man in an oversized suit. "Isla, please," he wheezed. I leaned down, my face inches from his. "Don't worry about the money, Max. Victor Drake isn't going to help you. See, I told him that if he helped me expose you, I wouldn't let the authorities know he was the one who suggested the embezzlement in the first place." I stood up, smoothed my emerald dress, and looked out at the richest people in the city. "The bar is open," I announced with a smile. "Enjoy the rest of the evening. It's all being paid for by Thorne Capital, which, as of tonight, I am the majority shareholder of." I walked off the stage without looking back. 1 week later, I visited Max in the medical wing of the Federal Holding Facility. He looked unrecognizable. Without the supplements, his body had crashed. He looked like a man 20 years older than he was. "Why?" he croaked from his bed. "You had everything. We were a power couple." I sat down, crossing my legs elegantly. We weren't a couple, Max. You were a predator, and I was your prey. You just forgot that some plants are carnivorous. I leaned in closer. Roxanne is gone, by the way. She tried to flee to Dubai, but since her passport was flagged as a co-conspirator, she's currently in a cell 3 doors down from yours. She's already telling the DA everything about your biolab and the illegal peptides. Max's eyes filled with tears. I loved the Empire, Isla, more than anything. I know, I said, standing up. That's why I'm keeping it. I've rebranded Thornix. It's now the Thorn Conservation Group. We're using your stolen millions to build public parks and botanical research centers. Your legacy is going to be used to grow the very dirt and flowers you hated so much. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and Max? I had the Sentinel Ring Company send me one last report. Your heart rate is perfectly normal now. It's the first time you've been optimized in years. You're finally just a man. The heavy steel door slammed shut. And for the first time in 10 years, I breathed in the fresh, clean air of a world